吧，一二三，听得见吗？音响老师，你这边听得见我的声音吗？一、二、三、四，可以。有电流声吗？
可以的，有了。好，结束了之后，
结束。
我回去是不是他在接？就活动正式开始的时候，嘉宾不是坐在舞台上吗？对吧？他坐定之后，那个画面就是切中间的吗？老波，你中间不是有个机会是拍沙发的吗？对不对？对，来你切中间那画面，沙发上的画面。现在只对提示器。两台能一起同步吗？这个电视机。啊。对对，我就是这个意思。然后正常你该切什么切什么，就是刚才我们踩过所有环节都没问题，提示也没问题。就是空白的地方，就你凡是你黑页出外星人头像的那些，你不知道切什么的，你就现场，明白了吧？就是正常的，你 zoom 的画面该什么刚刚都对，就是。
喂，好的，没问题，没问题。好，进行议题3的环节，2位老师已经在台上了。那本议题由副院长来主持。就是切许院长的。就是我上去说话的时候，就是切的是这个议题的内容，对吧？议题就是这个。然后我请徐院长来主持的时候，就切他自己的画面。好，那接下来的环节就交给他。那第一个发言的是薛现场。音乐可以小一点声，因为就是对，很快。露，他就在台上，对对对，这个地方就轻，就是不用那么。对对对，然后他开始过 PPT， 什么的都准备一下。下一个是 David Long 是线上。会切回主 K 吗？对。那就是我要么只能看到徐院那个 Zoom 的画面，要么就只能看到 David Long 这个，就是他俩不能同步的是吗？行，那就一定要先切回徐院长的画面。好，然后他介绍的时候，好 ，OK。嘉宾准备好的画面，这个画面是周播。就是给他一个什么演讲者模式是吗？这是他的大头。对。就这个音乐小一点声，不要太大。刚说话，他应该会马上说话。好，没问题。对，没问题。是两个不一样是吗？一个是他的 PPT， 有一个他在。OK， 好好好。周老师。对，吴海登和那个一样的。对对对对，就是再到周老师线下，他再放那个，他更新的一个。对，然后到这个评论环节，到时候同事也会线上的提问情况。他在这儿，信息通报的环节是那个他来控，然后他那边的助理也会帮他做线上的问题，所以整体的这院长他来控制。 视频帮我切一下Zoom的画面。您切一下Zoom的画面。现在还是主 K， 这个不动，只有那一个切了，这个没有切。好。Hello, Professor. 这个麦一会儿有，一会儿没有。Hi, Professor.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
No. No, it's very, very soft.
Okay, so what about now?
It's a bit better. It's a bit louder.
Yeah,
Yes.
I suppose it's a problem from the microphone in my hand.
Okay.
I'm using this one. It's much better. Okay. So.
Good morning or good afternoon in your case.
Good morning. Good morning. So you will be the commentator of this session.
Yes.
You have been tested, right? You have tested the Zoom before.
I can hardly hear you. Wait a second.
Okay, what about now?
Yes, it's a bit better. Yes.
So, Professor, you will be the commentator of the session. The moderator, Ambassador Xu Bu.
Okay.
He will control the pace.
Good.
Okay. And feel free to join the discussion session. That's almost everything here.
Okay.
I think you're familiar with Zoom, so there's not much I have to say.
Okay, good. So we start in about 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, 30 minutes.
Okay. Okay, good. I see you then.
喂，2021年海洋合作与治理论坛。好的，就用这个。 王冠雄老师，您在吗？
喂，王老师你好。王老师好。王老师好。能看到我吗 ？Hello， 嗨，能，看到了，能听到。王老师你好，能听到吗？听不到。
王老师，听 不到，听不到，王老师，是不是您那边的麦克风没有打开？或者您戴个耳机试一下。王老师，您可以听到我这边的声音吗？不行，听不到。
现在可以听得到声音吗？请问可不可以听得到？
喂，王老师你好。
哎，你好。
哎，好久不见。
哎，是平平。
是的。
哎，现在可以听到吗？
在这。
现在可以听得到声音了吗？
可以，可以，很清楚。
可以啊。
嗯。
哦，OK，好，那就好。我刚才还想说，另外再连接呢。
那个是用英文还是中文讲？
我用英文。
英文讲是吧？好的，
是。
那我听您的节奏，帮您播放那个
好
文件。
好，那到时候我就会说那个 next page please， 那就麻烦您。
王老师，你是不是可以自己播呢？因为
我自己播是不是？
会控制不住，不知道您的节奏。
哦，好，好。
你自己共享的文件。
好，我来试一下我自己播的那个效果怎么样？
好的。我们现场的嘉宾朋友们，大家下午好，欢迎大家回来。我们这个议题还有10分钟开始， 想邀请大家前排就坐，我们尽量前排就坐，前排都 OK 的，第一排、第二排、第三排都可以。请我们后面的嘉宾都集中一下，我们往前就坐，谢谢。我们现场所有的嘉宾朋友们，会议即将开始，还有大概10分钟的时间。那为了更好的一个会议效果，请大家前排就坐，前排就坐。 Professor David Ong, are you online?
Hi, yes. Is that Jenny? I'm online, yes.
Hi,
Hello.
nice to meet you here. So will you use PowerPoint later?
No, I'm not going to be using PowerPoint, please.
Okay, noted. See you later.尊敬的各位嘉宾、各位代表，欢迎大家回到我们的会场。接下来我们要进行的是议题3的环节——南海海洋治理实践。首先，让我们有请本环节的现场2位发言嘉宾薛桂芳老师和邹欣庆老师上场。有请薛老师和邹老师，有请。 好，接下来让我们用掌声有请本议题的主持人、习近平外交思想研究中心秘书长、中国国际问题研究院党委书记、院长徐步先生主持本议题。掌声有请。
Hi, everyone. 大家好. Hello, everybody. So, it's really an honor to have the opportunity to moderate session 3, Ocean Governance Practice in the South China Sea. I'm sure we all believe the Symposium on Global Maritime Cooperation and Ocean Governance is a very important event for all of us. Not only something related how to govern, maritime affairs, but also, really from the perspective of how to maintain peace and stability and cooperation in the region. So this is really a very important, symposium, and of course, ocean governance is one of the very important content, of the symposium. So for this session, we have altogether 5 very distinguished scholars. We have Xiu Guifang from Shanghai Communication University, and we have David Ong from Nottingham University of UK, and we also have Professor Wang Guangxiong from Taiwan Normal University, and we have Professor Wu Haidong, the National University of Singapore. And we also have Professor Zhou Xingqing from Nanjing University, that is also the university where I studied for quite a few years. And we have also Professor Naylor Matz-Luke as a commentator from Germany. So let me start by inviting Professor Xu Guifang to kick off. So Professor Xu, you please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Ambassador Xu. It's such a great honor to be chaired both, I think, for this symposium. The first one, the inaugural one, and today. Because I use my slides in Chinese and I also want to talk in Chinese because we have the interpreters. So I apologize to our foreign scholars. I will be starting in Chinese. 各位嘉宾，各位下午好。非常荣幸啊，有这样一个机会呢，来在这里边跟大家交流呢，关于海洋合作、海洋治理这样的一个非常重大的一个议题吧。那我呢，这个也有点感慨，在这个和小伙伴们准备这个发言的时候呢，我就想起来，我大概20年前就提呢，我应该是多边主义的奉行者啊，就提我们在南海应该建立一个渔业委员会。那么当时呢，就是做了一个很系统的研究，后来因为情况比较复杂，就没有发什么东西。然后后来这几年呢，就是回到现在的这样的一个背景之下呢，我们南海呢，大家知道。有很多的这种变化啊，非常重大的一些变化。然后我就在讨论，就在想，是不是还可以在环境保护方面建立一些这种机制。然后呢，这个呢是一个南海很具体化、稍微微观一点的，就是关于海洋保护区的一个多边合作。所以呢，算起来呢，应该就是20年的时间呢，大概是一个多边系列的第3发吧，或者第3弹。然后呢，是希望呢能够有这样一个机会呢，就是说稍微的再看一下我们的现实需求和制度构建。下一张。那么这个主要呢有3个方面吧，就前面呢我们说了这个多边合作的一些现实需求。那我想对我们现在的这个在这个会场的人，大概大家都比较了解。那么再一个呢，就是它的一些基础合作的基础，包括一些域外经验。那么最后呢，对这个制度构建呢做一点点这个展望。那么这个从这个保护的现实需求这块呢，那我们这个呢都大家都非常的熟悉啊。我们这个在我们这个地区，我们这个海域呢， 面临着非常严重的问题。包括上午的这个报告，我们听下来就是说，如果说我们面临的这个海洋治理最大的挑战，其中一个呢就是生物多样性的一个丧失吧。那么这个在南海这个呢毫无例外，而且我们应该说更加严重啊，由于我们自己现有的一些情况。然后呢，这个整个的在这个海域的这种活动呢，对这个生物多样性的破坏是格外严重的。所以在这个里边呢，就是这些我们大家都比较熟悉，我就迅速的往下过了。那么这个现实需求这个里边呢，我想可能就是说能够从治理的角度去考虑，能够稍微有一些改善，或者最终能够就是说能够呢，就是说引导到我们所希望看到的一个局面的话呢，就是说我们地区合作的这种动力和参与度怎么样能够把它推广开来。那么这个呢，我们知道我们这个沿岸国这个对这个海洋经济啊，这个资源这种利用这方面的这个倚重度呢就非常的强。那么包括呢国内立法的一些情况，然后呢这个现有的一些机制呢我们是存在的，但是呢相对来讲比较松散，也比较碎片化。那么还有呢这种合作机制始终呢就是说像我自己个人经历20来年一直在提这个多边合作。那但是呢，没有很好的一个合作的机制的一个构建，所以在这个当中呢，虽然我们一直都在提，包括呢软法硬法，我们说软硬兼施，那么还有呢，我们认为这些海洋环境保护啊、渔业啊这些合作都是比较低敏感度的，但始终呢也还是有一定的敏感性。其他的一些这样的那样的一些这种现有的一些合作的这种基础，那么包括南海最大的这个沿海国中国，那么这些年呢越来越多的呢，我自己感受到非常明显的一种就是投入啊，在这方面的一些努力吧，那么和周边的一些国家呢开展一些不同类别的不同向下的一些合作，能够看到取得非常明显的一个进展。所以在这个里边，我想这都是给我们一些很好的一些这种基础。那么在这个海洋保护区这个项下呢，就是在南海周边国家，其实我们看一下呢，大家都有，而且呢，这个有国际的一些力量或者一些专业的人士呢，来到我们这个地区，跟我们一起呢，在做一些保护。尤其像这个珊瑚的这个保护，我就认识很多呢，来自世界各地各国的这种顶尖的科学家，在我们这个区域里，差不多贡献他们一生的才智，然后来跟我们一起来做这些保护。还有我们一些 NGO 这样的一些非常像 TNC 啊、WWF 这种都合作非常多的。那么在这个当中呢，都是有很多这种既有的经验，然后呢，可以呢使我们能够呢很好的去，在这个领域里边进行一些深度的一些耕耘。那么如果从域外经验呢，之前我在讨论环保的这个机制的时候呢，也提到一些，比方说这个相似的一些海域，这个我们这个研究这方面的很多的老师、很多学者、学生，都有这方面的一些研究，其实成果也是我感觉到特别多的、越来越丰富、越来越细致的一些钻研。那么跟我们类似的情况的地理环境啊、政治环境、生态环保的需要、地区合作的这种共识，所以在这个里边呢，他们的一些做法呢，都是很值得我们去借鉴的。那么在这个当中，如果我们分析的话呢，我们可以呢，就是大概从他们，比方说对这个实体性的问题的一些解决，比方说他制定一些区域的法律制度，以这种框架公约加上这种议定书，或者是呢以一些其他合适的一些适合本地区的或者是这个当地的这种情况的这样的一些方式方法来解决这样的一些问题。那么还有呢，像这个针对这个专业的问题，比如特别保护区建立这种名录，对它进行定期的一个审查，然后看看呢那个管理的情况是具体是怎么样情况的。那么包括呢，在这个程序上，下一张。那么在程序方面呢，也是呢，通过一些的这个比较这个专门的一些机构建立这样一些机制， 然后呢这样来呢推动这个具体的市场，就是一个比较长期、比较持续对这个问题的一个跟进。那么包括呢就是说在资金方面的这个资金保障等等的，就是这里边我们可以综合起来看的，就是所有的问题它都有一个解决的方法，只是可能有的呢就是说需要的时间多一点，困难呢难度大一点，但是还是能做的。就是所以我的几个结论就是我们南海呢。在条件成熟呢，这些我们都是可以做的，没有什么就是说我们绝对做不了的这样一个情况。那么进入下面，如果我们看一下这个具体的这种制度的构建这样的一个方向，大方向呢，那么我们前面一直强调，我们说可以先易后难，像我们解决争端一样的。那么实际上在这种保护合作，就像特别海洋保护区啊，或者是海洋环境的这种保护整体上这样的一些合作的话呢，其实也是一样的，我们可以一步一步的利用我们现有的一些机制。那么在这个里边呢，看哪一些做的比较好，或者在这个当中呢，我们查缺补漏，把这个短板呢补起来，然后逐渐的呢，发展成这样一个比较成体系的。因为保护区像和渔业有点类似，它还是相对上比较小的一个范围。那么把这一件事情做好，可能我们可以在更大范围上，更高层次上呢，来进一步的进行这种发展。所以在这个当中，比方说刚才我提到的像一些实体性的一些问题的一个解决，比方我们可以看呢。在这个当中，我们这个区域里边和这个对应的海域里边，哪一些其实可以有很大的相似性，或者我们稍加改良就可以呢，就是说能够使它呢在我们这个区域里边呢能够发挥它的效应。那么这个当中呢，我稍微的也列了一点，比方刚才你提到的软法硬法呀、不损害条款，然后我们很多现有的这些双边多边协定里面都会把这海洋法立场和争议的问题和我们所要解决的这些问题都能够给它分别开来。所以我想在这个方面呢。这个我们是可以有这样的。那么包括呢，这个像建立保护区名单，我们其实各个国家都有。那么这个当中，像我们这个周边国家的这些建设，都可以把它升华到这个区域的这个层面。那么这样的话，看起来呢，我们就是在这个实体性事务当中，我们可以互相呢取长补短。那么像这个当中，最近我们这个团队也在做一个中国海洋保护区的一个绩效评估。那么这个里边我们也是注意到，我们其实有很多的这个东西呢是可以供大家借鉴的。我们一共呢是270多个保护区，那么现在正在进行一个更高的升级版的一个自然保护地的一个建设。那么包括这种组织机构，刚才我也提了，我们有很多零零散散的不同类别的，然后呢，它在那儿呢也都在发挥作用，大家都非常努力，各个国家都是在这儿做。所以我想呢，在这块儿也是包括我们成立一点这种法律技术委员会，解决它专有的问题或者法律效力等等这样的一些问题。那么资金保障这个方面也是。我们也是可以的，大家可能注意到，像我们中国东盟的这种专门的这种基金啊，像我们这个会议的这种后续的一些经费的一些支持，都在这个项下。所以我想这个也是呢，不是说特别难做到的一个问题。那么还有呢，像我们可能出现的这种关于在保护区这个项下里边的一些就是说小的议题当中的不同意见等等的，所以我们可以呢建立一个这种相应的一个争端的一个解决，就不同意见呢可以有一个沟通交流的一个平台，那么再有一些合作互助的平台，那么能力建设这样的一些方面，我想总归呢，我们是一点一点的在做。像我讲的，回顾这么20来年的一个经历，能够感受到我们现在关注这个问题、关注这个领域的人已经越来越多，和当时我刚刚开始关注南海的这种多边合作的这个情况完全不可同日而语。所以我是有信心的啊，一点一点的去售卖我这样的一些观点，希望能够在不远的将来呢，看到我们有一个比较有成效的一个领域呢，能够发生出来。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Professor Xu Guifeng from Jiaotong University. I thought, I got, the name of the university wrong. I thought it's Communication University of Shanghai. It's called Jiaotong University. It's really a very difficult word to. It's really a very difficult word to translate. So, thank you, Professor Xu. She focused on biodiversity and ecological issues, and yes, it's true. Maritime, environmental degradation is really a big problem, for the whole world. And ecological protection is, really one of the priority the international community should pay attention to. Actually, remember in 2015, the United Nations issued a declaration on sustainable development of 2030. So sustainable development is so important for all of us, for the future of the world, and maritime environmental protection is, of course, at the core of environmental protection of all of us. So thank you, and let's now move to David Ong. So Professor David Ong from Nottingham Trent University, you please.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be at the symposium, and I hope that everyone can hear me well. I'm just speaking from home here. Can I have an indication with a thumbs up whether everyone can hear me well? Excellent. Thank you, Nella. So without further ado, I've only got 10 minutes, so I will start with my presentation. But before that, of course, I would like to thank the organizers, Ambassador Chu Bu for chairing this session, and of course, my fellow participants from many different countries, including very familiar faces and new faces. And of course, Julia, who I know very well now. Excellent presentation as always, Julia. So let me examine some of the normative elements in relation to ocean governance practice in the South China Sea. And I think this panel and this topic is very, very well chosen, because I'd like to focus on these two words, governance practice. They incorporate notions of clearly normativity, but also, in my view, institutionalization. So there's an element here of understanding that we have legal frameworks and that we also have institutional or organizational structures. So I'm going to just speak a little bit about these conceptual understandings of ocean governance and ocean governance practice. So moving on to practice, we then see that the practice can be seen through, obviously, from an international perspective, individual states. But increasingly, we see also arrangements of all different kinds, ranging from very strict treaties, very strictly written up treaties, which obviously have the effect under international law, certainly, of binding the states together, to much looser sub-regional and regional arrangements on a variety of issues. And I'm sorry, I didn't pick up initially from Julia's presentation because I hadn't picked up on the interpretation or rather the translation button. But I gather that towards the end of her presentation, certainly, she elaborated on the number of regional and sub-regional fora in which this interaction is now taking place. So what I would like to emphasize is the breadth of international law that applies to ocean governance practice in the South China Sea. And it's very important, I think, for me to try to emphasize that commentators on this particular topic, on the topic of the South China Sea in particular, very much focus on the application of international law. Certainly the legal commentators do, but actually commentators even from other areas, other sub-disciplines and disciplines, for example, international relations, also focus on international law, but then they decide to focus especially on the application of the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea in this area. In my view, while the UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, is obviously a significant instrument and indeed binds all the protagonist states in the South China Sea and the external partners of the countries that are literal states, protagonist states, states with direct interests in the South China Sea. Nevertheless, we should not be fooled into thinking that the international law on this maritime space consists solely of UNCLOS, which unfortunately is apparently the thrust of the outlook from most commentators on this region. My view is that we should actually, obviously, cover general international law all the way through the spectrum of law to the international soft law arrangements that I alluded to already. And those international soft law instruments are very much tied are very much now the prime movers for governance practice in the law of the sea convention. So they actually transcend their soft law status. Normatively, they are obviously not binding international law commitments. Yet because they are practiced almost on a daily basis between officials within these organizations and across the governments that are keen to, in fact, foster cooperation on multiple fronts, in particular, for example, scientific research, some element of fisheries arrangements, although, of course, bilaterally, there are still many problems between states in the South China Sea, but also, for example, in areas like Professor Julia Chu has mentioned now on marine environmental issues. So my point is to say that we have a spectrum of international law. And to go back to the first part of that spectrum, it's very important to note that general international law begins with the notion of sovereignty over territory. And where such maritime territory, even in the form of so-called rocks or islands, depending on how you would like to describe them or how you would like to define them, and the Law of the Sea Convention, the UNCLOS Convention, provides a definition, which is obviously a contested definition. But the point about international law on territory is that, especially in relation to far-flung maritime territories, we have a very low threshold of application in terms of evidence that is required to be able to ascertain sovereignty over even rocks or islands, rocks or small islands. So what we have to understand is that general international law actually, in fact, supports all the protagonist states in the South China Sea, several of the ASEAN states, of course, right, including my own country of origin, Malaysia, but also countries like Indonesia, which have islands in the South China Sea, which own, as it were, or have sovereignty, and of course also China and Taiwan. There is no getting away from it, right? Some of the evidence that the Chinese and Taiwanese authorities have accumulated in terms of the presence of Chinese official and unofficial presence of Chinese, shall we say, well, of Chinese entities, shall we say, on some of these rocks and islands, do show a basis for sovereignty. And we have to accept that, and also accept, therefore, the Chinese presence within the South China Sea, and indeed the Chinese participation in a large number of these soft law arrangements. So in closing, what I would like to emphasize is that general international law allows governance practices on multiple levels. The ultimately very specific level of, for example, bilateral joint development treaties is only one aspect of it, as is UNCLOS. Although UNCLOS is this overarching international law treaty governing South China Sea as well as all the oceans in the world, it is, after all, only one part of general international law. So I would emphasize the breadth and the width of international law in terms of ensuring the future cooperation in South China Sea. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Wang. Thank you so much. So Professor Wang talked a lot about, the breadth and width of international laws that may apply to the practice of governance in South China Sea. So yeah, he especially emphasized, UNCLOS is one of the very important, law of sea in guiding the dealing with the international, maritime issues. But, at the same time, we got to, notice there's a variety of spectrum of international laws, which may guide, countries in dealing with maritime issues. That's to say, UNCLOS is only one of the, international law that may, guide us in dealing with, international maritime issues. So thank you a lot, David. Let me now invite Professor Wang Guanxiong from Taiwan Normal University. Professor, you please.
Yeah, allow me to share my PowerPoint. Yeah, thank you, Chairman, Ambassador Xu. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Wu Shichun, the founding president of the National Institute for the South China Sea Studies, for including me in this very important conference. The reason why I said it is important, I think the reason is quite similar to Professor David Ong, because the main thing about this conference is talking about the governance issues. So today, my basic idea, it will be talking about the regional fisheries governance in the South China Sea region. And I'm going to talk about the practices and also the developments. And here is the outlines of my presentation today. I would develop my presentation into 4 parts. The first part is about the SDG 14. Why I would like to mention SDG 14, that is because some of the principles as well as the points mentioned in the SDG 14 are quite important to the main thing about the governance today. And secondly, I would talk about the multilateral cooperation in the South China Sea. I mean, for those existed cooperation. And then I would like also to mention the bilateral cooperation in the South China Sea. Then I would make a brief conclusion. So first of all, that will be the SDG 14. And actually, if we look back the development of the international fisheries, we could understand that before 1970s, the world's marine fish catches continued to increase at a rate of about 6% per year. But in the year 1970s, due to the sharp decline in fish production in Peru, the growth rate had dropped significantly. The situation has been even worse, that with the population growth and the social development. Therefore, demand for aquatic products has further increased. This would result that 34.2% of the fish stocks of the world's marine fisheries were classified as overfished in 2017. I think the situation will be much more serious in the area of the South China Sea. Therefore, in accordance with those developments about the international fisheries, that we could understand that really in the reality, we are facing 3 major problems. The first one is the population growth, and the second one will be the resources decline, and then the last one will be the environmental degradation. Therefore, the sustainable utilization of fishery resources has become an important issue for us to consider. It is understandable that fishery resources are renewable, and which means that they have the ability to reproduce if the environment is suitable for them, especially the human development and the utilization could be under reasonable management. I think that will be the most important part. And this would relate to the illegal fishing activities, which is IUU fishing, which are probably one of the most serious elements in international fisheries government. Therefore, let's come back to the SDG 14. SDG 14, it was developed in the September 2015. And in accordance with the international practices, we could understand that among the for those 17 sustainable development goals, we could understand that they are urgent call for action by all countries under the framework of global governance. And then let's look, just have a brief look at the different paragraphs about SDG 14, that is Sustainable Development Goals. Everyone would tell us that we have to do something before a certain year. For example, the first one, that is the by 2025, we have to prevent and reduce marine pollution. And then by the year 2020, we have to manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystem. In other words, we are having quite a lot of responsibilities to do something. But please pay attention to two paragraphs. The first one is the 14.4. We have to regulate harvesting and overfishing, IUU fishing activities, which would destruct fishing practices by 2020. And also, we have to prohibit fisheries subsidies before 2020. And actually now we are in 2021. And also we are facing still the same problem and the same issues. So I think probably under the our agreement of the Sustainable Development Goals, especially on Goals 14, we have to do something and to consider the situation more seriously. And by the way, we cannot forget another issue. Actually, it is not any issue. It is another 3 extra paragraph in the SDG 14. The first one says we have to increase scientific knowledge. And 14B says we have to provide access of small-scale artisanal fishers to marine resources and markets. And 14C, that would say that we have to have the ensure the full implementation of international law reflected in the UNCLOS. Therefore, I think for those 3 extra paragraphs in the SDG of 14, they are actually could be applied in the area of the South China Sea, just because surrounding for those states surrounding the South China Sea, I think for most of them, they for the fisheries in those littoral states, they are the small-scale artisanal fisheries. And also, their livelihood should be taken care of. So, 2 critical points that we could find in the SDG 14. First one, of course, oceans and seas are important to human lives. And the second one, that we have to combat the IUU, which is necessary for protect our our livelihood. Therefore, I can say for the SDG 14, not only for the supply of the, for SDG 14 and the purpose for us to protect the fishery resources, not only for the supply of protein, but also for the livelihood of the small-scale artisanal fishers in the region. Therefore, I believe it is important to say that we have to take care of the possibility of organizing a kind of arrangement to either to form a kind of international organization for, especially for the management and the conservation of the fishery resources. Or another thing is possibly we could do something about the regional governance for the fishery resources in the South China Sea region. Then talking about the governance, probably it could be the right time to have an exam on the specific term governance. So I quote these wordings from textbook talking about global governance as international organization, which was the author is Professor Thomas Weiss. He mentioned, I think that is quite a good point. He said that many readers are perhaps under the mistaken impression that international organization is equal to global governance. However, Professor Weiss, he mentioned that whereas the international organization concentrates on formal structures, that is the basic concept that we could understand, because whenever we're talking about the international organization, we always mention about the secretariat. We also mention about the meeting, the meeting of the board, and something like that. So we always pay attention to those issues about the structures. However, the global governance describes a range of formal and informal processes that reflect globalization and a growing recognition of problems that defy solution by a single state. So if we put this idea, apply this idea in the fishery resources management issues of the South China Sea region, then I would think possibly we don't have to think too much about the organization issues. Rather, we could pay attention to the development of the fishery resources governance matters in this region. So next, I'm going to take several instances that from my study. The first one is about the multilateral cooperations. I could find out several organizations for the fisheries cooperation for the South China Sea region, and I'm not going to say too much about those multilateral cooperations. I just want to pay attention to two important issues. The first one is about the WCPFC, which stands for the West and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission. WCPFC is one of the regional fishery management organizations, and probably the only one that the RFMO's convention area covers the South China Sea. However, according to the announcement showing on the website of the WCPFC, it says that the area covered by the WCPFC convention covers almost 20% of the Earth's surface, quite big, that's for sure. However, the western boundary notionally, thanks to the East Asian seaboard, it is understood that the convention area does not include the South China Sea. In other words, we don't have this kind of RFMO or international or regional organization for the fisheries management matters. Another one is the CIFDEC. And CIFDEC is an autonomous intergovernmental body established in 1947 And the CIFDAC, the purpose for CIFDAC is to contribute to the promotion on the fisheries development in the Southeast Asia. And also, we could find out that for the purpose for the CIFDAC also include those like aquaculture matters, and as well as the market issues. And then let's move on to the bilateral cooperation. I listed some of the cooperation on the screen. We could find out that 1974, there was an agreement on the fisheries between the Philippines and Indonesia. However, I would like to specifically to mention the year 2000 agreement on fishery cooperation in the Beibu Gulf between China and Vietnam. This bilateral agreement took effect on the 30th June 2004 and ended on June 3rd, 2019. And then it was extended another year. So during the 15 years in which it was implemented, the agreement has played an important instrument in maintaining sustainability and order in the Gulf. So it is quite a good practice between China and Vietnam. And also on this page, I would like to mention about the agreement, the last one, 2015, the agreement concerning the facilitation of cooperation on law enforcement in fisheries matters between Taiwan and the Philippines. In other words, we didn't pay too much attention on the fishery resources. We pay attention on the law enforcement, how the conduct would be between two sides on the sea. And then for this one, as we can notice that for the second one, there is a joint communique about the combat IUU fishing and promote sustainable fisheries governance between Indonesia and Vietnam. In other words, we could find out that for the past several decades, the parties in this region actually they had tried their best to conclude this kind of bilateral agreement or arrangement to uncertain matters. The first one is about the IUU. And the second one would be about the fisheries resources management, and then the law enforcement issues. So I think for those issues, they are really concerning about the resources matters in this region, just because we are getting fewer and fewer, less and less fishery resources in the South China Sea. So let's come to the conclusion. I would say that global governance might be the bridge between international relations and international organizations. And from the past several decades of the experience told us that we could exercise quite a good some of the practices about fishery management and cooperation. And but even though we are quite how can I say it? We are quite enthusiastic and quite energetic on the bilateral cooperation. But however, I still think we could use the bilateral cooperation as a base and build up the confidence. And then I think the multilateral cooperation would be the future so that a well-organized regional governance on the fishery resources might be possible. So that is my presentation. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wang, for your very interesting and thought-provoking, ideas regarding, fishery cooperation. This is really a very important area. Yes, fishing resources may be renewable, but if overfishing, IUU fishing, and destructive fishing practices are not going to be stopped, fishing resources may not be renewable. So you have elaborated very well, on how to combat, all those challenges we all, face. And I also agree with you a lot when you talk about, the similarities or commonalities and differences of international organizations and global governance. I worked, in the United Nations for quite a few years and in New York. And I also, worked as Chinese ambassador to ASEAN, as a regional organization, for quite a few years. And it's true, international organizations and regional, organizations are very important, but, global governance can be more complicated. So how to make sure international organizations, will be able to provide not only, the platform, but also, to provide the ways and, roles for global governance is really something we all need to, work very hard. Thank you, Professor Wang. Now, let me invite Professor Wu Ha-dun from National University of Singapore. Please.
His Excellency, can you see me and can you hear me?
Yeah.
United States, Canada, Australia, and China. What do those four countries have in common? Except the fact that they are the biggest countries in the world, they were also the first countries which adopted the ocean governance policy. It was Ocean Governance Policy 1.0. If you want to talk about Ocean Governance Policy 2.0, then Vietnam would take the central stage. In this case, Chungguo is no longer China, but it's Vietnam. So, Mr. Chair, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let's explore how Vietnam has transformed from Ocean Governance Policy 1.0 to Ocean Governance Policy 2.0. The first maritime strategy of Vietnam was adopted in 2007. Its vision was to make Vietnam become a strong and rich maritime nation, which can exploit the nation's full maritime potential and develop comprehensively all maritime sectors. After 10 years of implementation of the maritime strategy, in 2018, the government of Vietnam undertook a review of this strategy in order to see what are the achievements and what are the limits. In terms of achievements, marine and coastal regions have contributed 60% to Vietnam's economy, 17 coastal economic zones and 58 coastal industrial zones were created, generating a total value of $8 billion per year and 130,000 jobs. In terms of limits, the contribution of maritime industries to the overall economy of Vietnam is still weak. Only 30% of our GDP are derived from maritime industries. The living standard in coastal regions is still lower than national average. A lot of people is still living in poor fishing villages where both economic income and human development index is still lower than national average. You can see there's another girl here. She's just hiding behind the pole. And ocean awareness is still limited. It means people are still very confused about the role of the ocean, confused about what is sustainable development. So based on this review, in 2018, Vietnam came up with a new strategy for ocean governance. The strategy for sustainable development of the maritime economy until 2030, with vision until 2045. It was adopted by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Vietnam in 2018, and its vision is to make Vietnam become a powerful maritime nation with sustainable development, prosperity, security, and safety, actively participating into the resolution of international and regional issues about the sea and ocean. The strategy provides a number of guiding strategies in order to achieve this vision. First, it gives a priority order of development of maritime and coastal industries. The order is as follows. First, tourism and marine service, shipping, exploitation of oil and gas and other marine mineral resources, aquaculture and fisheries, coastal industries, and renewable energy and new maritime economic industries. You can see that we put more emphasis on sectors which are less resource involved. For example, tourism, for example, shipping. Territorial and functional maritime zoning. In terms of territorial zoning, we divided the maritime area of Vietnam into 4 areas: the northern area, the central northern area, the southeastern area, and the southwestern area. For each of these areas, based on the regional characteristic, the regional advantage, natural advantage, we will focus on one sector, one maritime sector, or maritime sectors in order to give priority. For instance, in the northern area, we would focus on port services in order to cater shipping to China. In the central northern area, we would focus on oil and gas because the Vietnam's continental shelf in this area have high potential for oil and gas. In southeastern area, we would focus on aquaculture and fisheries because the fish stock in this area is more abundant. And in southwestern area, we will focus on tourism, especially ecological tourism, because there's Phu Quoc Island in this area, which is Vietnam's biggest marine protected area. In terms of functional zoning, we will divide our maritime area into 3 types of zones. Protection zone, where exploitation activities are excluded in order to conserve marine biodiversity. Buffer zone, where activities are restricted, and development zone, where most of our activities, economic activities, would take place. Development of marine culture, we will try to develop a marine culture on coastal communities based on our seafarer traditions. This will not only help boost marine tourism, but also help make people become more aware of the ocean and become more friendly towards the marine environment. So that was the process of transformation from Ocean Governance Policy 1.0 to Ocean Governance Policy 2.0 in Vietnam. Now let's see how this process in Vietnam can provide ideas for China ocean reform. First, I think that it's time for China to have a comprehensive upgrade of the ocean governance policy as well. As I said earlier, China was one of the first countries in the world which adopted an ocean policy. However, the latest comprehensive ocean governance policy of China, which is the outline of the National Marine Development Plan, was adopted in 2008 by the State Council. It was more than 10 years ago. By these 10 years, the ocean has known a lot of new developments. For example, in terms of technologies, we have automatic shipping. In terms of new challenge, we have sea level rising. So I think it's time for China to have a new comprehensive ocean governance policy, taking into consideration of all these new developments. Besides, many of China's legal instruments relating to ocean governance are, sorry for me to say, quite outdated. I think it's time for China to review and revise those legal instruments. Second, I think China can also consider interesting ocean governance policy making to the Central Committee of the Communist Party. So both Vietnam and China are led by the Communist Party, and we know that in the Communist Party structure, the Central Committee is the highest authority body. If we entrust ocean governance policy making to the Central Committee of the Communist Party, I think there are a couple of advantages. First, we will eliminate all the inter-agency competition which occur within the State Council structures. And second, with the involvement of the Communist Party, I think we can mobilize much more resources in order to implement our ocean governance policy. because we all know that the Communist Party can mobilize a lot of resources. By resources, I mean human resources and institutional resources. So that will make the ocean governance policy making much more effective, including areas beyond China's sovereign claim in ocean policy planning. So China has sovereign claims in the South China Sea and East China Sea. However, China also have a lot of activities and interests in other areas beyond the area of South China Sea and East China Sea. For instance, in the Arctic, Antarctic, or in areas beyond national jurisdiction. So in order to ensure a consistency of policy and ocean policy planning, I think China should include those areas in its ocean governance policy. Creating a one belt one road for wildlife. So one belt one road is a mega strategy with the purpose to attract resources from all over the world to China, to attract richness from all over the world to China. However, I think that you let out very important resources, which is wildlife. Many important migratory species travel from all over the world to China, like migratory birds, green turtles, or dugong. You know, they go to China and Chinese water to breed, to find food, to grow up, and to mate. I think that some of the money from the One Belt One Road strategy can be used to create infrastructures, not for sheep, but for animals, for them to enjoy their stay in China, for them to have a pleasant stay in China. I don't know, create some sort of 5-star hotels for green turtles underwater. And also some of the money can be used to create a safe corridor for those animals to reach China. By safe corridor, I mean ecological corridor. Because some of these animals, you know, they travel hundreds of thousands of kilometers from all over the world before they reach Chinese shore. Lastly, I think that having a peaceful, stable, and prosperous surrounding sea areas should be the most important, or one of the most important objectives in China ocean governance policy. Without a peaceful, stable, and prosperous surrounding sea areas, the implementation of ocean development measures by China will be very difficult. So that should be one of the most central or one of the most important objectives in China ocean governance policy. Thank you. His Excellencies, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Professor Wu Haidong. You know, thank you so much, you know, for elaborating for all of us regarding, you know, the maritime economic development of Vietnam, and you also introduced the maritime and the strategic sustainable development of maritime economy of Vietnam, and you know, that really helped us a lot, you know, in understanding the maritime, you know, economic development of Vietnam a lot. And of course, you know, you made us very interested in suggestion to include one belt and one road, you know, initiative for wildlife. You know, I'm sure, you know, that will be a very interesting idea. You know, if we do have, you know, an international wildlife park, you know, that would be, you know, so much fun for not only, you know, the children, but for all of us. And of course, you know, I'm sure, you know, you made some, you know, very interesting ideas and proposals regarding, you know, what China, you know, can learn from others regarding to make China's, you know, maritime, you know, economic development plan, you know. So all those are really, you know, thought-provoking and very, you know, interesting. So thank you. And let me now invite Professor Zhou Xingqing from Nanjing University.
Thanks, Chair. And, good morning, everyone. My talk is about marine microplastics, which is slightly different from the previous ones. But before my formal presentation, I'd like to share my experience yesterday when I flew to Sanya in Chinese, very short. Could you please help me to translate into English? 我非常简单的说一下昨天晚上那个经历啊，因为昨天晚上飞机很晚啊，那个我是从那个南京飞到三亚，我是做环境的，所以我比较注意环保啊，我也比较注意平时尽量少的来使用一次性的杯子啊，这些就是比较对环境不友好的东西，所以在飞机上呢，那个空姐空少非常好的哈服务，给我们送来晚上的点心和饮料哈，吃完以后他就会把这个饮料的那个杯子收走。那我说我先放着啊，我先放着，如果你要再送的话，我就用这个就好。那个空姐说没关系，我们可以再给你用新的哈。我说没事，我可以再用，如果再送的话，我就再用。旁边还有个空少特别豪气啊，说没关系，我们多的是啊，这个东西非常多啊。我说没关系，我说我可以留着的。后来空姐凑到我跟前儿啊，非常小声的，就声音非常小，她说：“你是怕我们的杯子脏吗？”非常诚恳哈，他一点讽刺意味都没有，非常诚恳。我觉得他们服务特别的好，所以我就没有办法，就是他非常成功的把我那个杯子拿走，完了以后又送来一杯新的给我。其实我已经将近20多年，我不用每天啊，我给自己做的一个规定就是不用第二个一次性的这个用品，但是昨天我用了第二个一次性的用品啊。我说这个是什么意思呢？就是说，其实我们做环境也好啊，做其他的东西也好啊，我们其实需要整个社会的一种合力，包括整个那个社会的意识哈，有一个向一个共同的方向来做才可以哈，否则的话确实非常难。就像我们这样的，就是非常注意这方面的，其实也很难哈。经常我们去到那个遇到一些事情，我们不可避免还会用一些我们所不喜欢用的一些东西。好了，非常简单的一个short experience I'd like to share with you because what I'm going to talk is about plastic. So now plastic. My talk is going to have 4 parts. The first one is what are microplastics? Then I'm going to share with you where are the marine microplastics, and then challenges, and then what can be done. Microplastics is the very tiny plastics with the size less than 5 millimeters, which is very simple concept, very easy to understand. About one century, like 100 years ago, when the plastic was created and not very, right now, only 100 years passed. Right now, we cannot just get rid of using plastics every day, just like the experience I just shared with you. And you can see the very quick increase of the plastic waste generating from the whole world. People may say we can reuse it or we can recycle it, but it's not going to be some like structural difference, but some numerical changes. Finally, all those kind of plastics be reused or then get back to the environment. Oops. So where are those micro plastic, tiny plastic? Firstly, they made from some original plastic products. It's just directly from the original products like ties or micro bins from some washing supplies, or fibers, or some building pans, or some artificial lawns. Or they made from some like degradation from by some large plastics, like various different wastes, like domestic garbage, industrial waste, or agricultural waste, etc. All this kind of microplastics will eventually entering our sewer system or river system, or some of them to the to the air, to our atmospheric system, and finally most of them will be transformed to the ocean, to our ocean. So this is why marine microplastics are so important. Right now, we can find microplastics almost everywhere in our ocean, from the surface water to our water column and the sediments, and also our marine lives everywhere. In the ocean surface, like open sea, we have at least 5 areas which have very huge microplastics, and the South and North Pacific, South and North Atlantic, and also Indian Ocean. In the coastal area, may I say, suffered even more serious than the open sea, because in this area there are even more microplastics in terms of the density. Like in China's marginal seas, Bohai Sea is the most serious piece of water, and then the East China Sea and part of the South China Sea. Well, some people may ask why microplastics so harmful in my view, because sometimes it looks very cute, very colorful, and also even in shape, it's very beautiful, and it's very tiny in size. Why they are harmful? I think at least 2 things we need to think about or take care of. One is that when microplastics enter the ocean, they are degraded into even smaller one, and then eventually they're going to release some chemical stuffs, which makes the environmental issues very much complicated. The second one is that plastic, including microplastic, in the ocean will eventually covered by some organic matters, and most of them are like microbial community. When the microplastic covered by bio community, we call it biofilm, which really makes the microplastic very much attractive and delicious for those marine lives, especially very small marine lives like invertebrate and small marine fishes. They eat them because they taste really good with some microbiota community. And then those kind of small marine lives eat microplastics. Those kind of microplastics will transfer from the lower trophical level to the higher one in the ecosystem. And finally, it will have some negative impact to the whole ecosystem, including to human beings, because we eat marine fish. This is why marine ecosystem are damaged so badly compared with other kind of ecosystem, like freshwater system or terrestrial ecosystem. Marine ecosystem suffered quite a lot from the microplastics. Then what can be done? Because it's so serious, what can be done? It's easy to draw a very simple conceptual diagram. In this diagram, we can easily find some links or some nodes which possibly we can lay some improvement, like technical improvement or policy improvement. I don't have a point, but if you can see in note 1, where the plastic be generated, plastic be produced. In this note, in this link, we may have some policies to reduce the use or reduce the production of the plastics. And in the note 2, where the microplastic generated from the products. Here we may have some technical improvement to have some like advanced materials to reduce the microplastic generating. And the third one, the microplastic to our natural system. Here, perhaps we can put down some equipment or advices to collect the plastic or microplastic. Seems to be simple, but the natural world is always much more complicated than the concept. This is something we did in South China Sea. We found that at least 10 to 15% of the microplastics in the surface water are from the air. So it's impossible for us to collect microplastics from the air. Cannot do that, it's not doable. And moreover, when we look at the South China Sea, the microplastic sometimes from like come from the east coastal city of mainland China, sometimes just from Japan, from Korea, and sometimes from Philippines. So it's multi-origin. We can hardly, use a very simple technique or simple policy to deal with this multilateral issues in South China Sea. When we broaden our view from global wide, we can find some other interesting thing. There are two different colors. One is the red bar, one is the blue bar. Red bar presents the microplastics generated from the land and then entered the ocean. The blue bar presents the microplastic density in the coastal water. The interesting thing is that some countries or some nations will create a lot amount of microplastic into the ocean, but they just didn't suffer badly from the microplastic pollution in the coastal water, like United States and Colombia and also China. Those countries generating lots of plastics and entering the ocean, but the coastal water remains not very bad, sometimes very good in terms of the microplastic density. But the other country like Japan, Denmark, they do not generate very much microplastic into the ocean, but their coastal water suffered quite a lot from the microplastic density, Japan and Denmark. So this kind of conflict may make the situation even more complicated because it may create some obstacle in terms of the willingness to take action to deal with the things, or they may change their expectation in allocating their responsibility in the microplastic pollution in the ocean. So this is the real situation. I think my presentation will technically finished here, but I'm not going to draw a conclusion of my presentation. I just want to remain a question for everyone here, because you are an expert in this in the international governance, and international law. Right now, we all know that microplastics are our common threats or a big issue in a marine environment. The question is that when and how can we work together to take action to sort these things out? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zhou. Thank you so much, for sharing with us what you think about the macro plastic as pollutants, which is damaging the, not only, the maritime, environment, but also, is creating such a big problem for humanity. And it's for sure, the coastal area is much more serious than the open sea, as far as being polluted by the macro plastic stuff. So it is really the challenge for the whole international community, and we have talked a lot regarding how to try our best to have a better maritime governance. And actually, in my view, maritime governance is really part of global governance, and of course, regional governance as well. If there is not a strong global governance provided by the strong leadership of all the international community members, then we won't be able, to have to do something, regarding maritime, protection or maritime governance. It's a pity. It's really a pity. The global governance is really not developing as it should have been able to. Like, the pandemic, the international community is so seriously affected and harmed by the pandemic. But in my view, the international community has not been able to do a good job. There is no concrete, constructive, and productive global governance vis-a-vis combating the pandemic at all. That is to say, the international community really need to join hand in hand to make sure we really do something, to combat the challenges, whether, it's transnational or it's, global, or it's, in one continent or in one, subcontinent, or, related to several countries. I mean, it's such an ardent task for all of us, to think about, to think hard, and to really, to start to do something. Now, without further ado, let me now invite, Professor Luna. I don't know, whether I pronounce the name or not, correct or not, but anyway, let me invite Professor Luna from University of Trier, Germany. Professor, please.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your kind introduction and also for providing the summaries of each of the talks. Thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me. You've given me a difficult task. I've realized I'm the only commentator, and I have to say a few words on each of the 5 really excellent presentations. Please forgive me that I will start with some general remarks and then try to weave in reference to your papers and to your talks. Or rather, let me start with the last presentation that we had with Professor Zhu on microplastics, because you asked the question in the end, when and how do we respond? And I would like to take this further and say, well, when and how, and on what level, and by what means. Driving this from the concrete example of microplastics, which is really a pressing issue to the more general issues of protecting our ocean. And like our Ambassador Xu has just said, of course, cooperation is key. We cannot protect the ocean without global and regional cooperation. I like the parallel to the pandemic, where it's absolutely clear that we all have to act together. And in fact, we may see the effects of this global pandemic very concretely. There are people sick, there are people dying. But if we do not protect our ocean in the long run, we really take away the foundation for life on Earth. The ocean is so significant as a stabilizer of our climate, as a source of food, as a means of transportation, and you have made the references to economic life in general, but it goes much further. It really goes to the core of our existence. The question I would like to start with is international law or international law of the sea a suitable path? And then what role for the Law of the Sea Convention in these different fields that you have mentioned? I think that and I regret to say that as a professor for public international law and the law of the sea, that some questions cannot be solved by law. Even if the Law of the Sea Convention, even if all the other legal instruments are applicable, there are certain elements that have to be dealt with outside the law. I think we have seen that in the context of the South China Sea quite clearly with regard to the arbitration. Yes, the definition of islands is something that the law of the sea addresses, but we have seen that neither the content nor the procedure, the process of this arbitration has solved issues. So I think even if law is applicable, it is not always the path to solve all questions. But for other issues, for other questions, law is of course a reliable means of governance. It provides for stability, but it's not the only means. And I like that in all your presentations, you have addressed different aspects of governance. Sometimes our governance is mistaken with international organization, as Professor Wang has stated, but sometimes it's also mistaken with international law. And international law and international governance are not synonyms. Governance is much broader. It refers to practice on different levels, not only legal practice, but economic practice. So it's much broader. And I think if we talk about marine governance, we should take the term seriously and not just use it as some kind of buzzwords of doing something, but of analyzing the different elements. So coming back to the law and the Law of the Sea Convention. Well, the Law of the Sea Convention certainly is a framework that allows for the inclusion of more specific regulations. And so for me, it remains one of the important pillars of marine governance, but of course as a framework and not as the one solution. It cannot be the one solution. And my perspective is that it doesn't want to be the only solution. It gives a framework that needs to be filled with other law, with regional and national law and practice and other governance instruments, like economic incentives. Professor Xu in her introduction in first talk has spoken about the stick and the carrot. And I think we should all focus much more upon the carrot of cooperation, of flexibility, to come together to arrange questions bilaterally, multilaterally, by soft law, by hard law, instead of pointing to the stick being the compulsory dispute settlement under the Law of the Sea, which in many cases is the centerpiece of the convention. I think it's important, but it doesn't solve all issues. And if it appears that this compulsory dispute settlement is used as a stick, it will not take us where we want to go, where we want to arrive at a sustainable ocean governance. If we look a bit behind maybe the motivation to cooperate, Professor Xu has emphasized the marine economy as a driver She's also mentioned fragmentation on national and international levels, and that again leads to multilateral cooperation, the necessity for the environment, but also for fisheries. So I think that the need and the want to implement the sustainable development goals, to cooperate for fisheries and for the environment are really important drivers that provide for fora, for stable fora that in the end enhance the necessary cooperation and eventually provide for overall better marine governance for the region. Be that the South China Sea, where many problems are more complex than in other parts. But I think it's a general remark to be made that addressing specific issues like fisheries, like marine environmental protection, rules for blue growth, sustainable blue growth, is really key to regional protection of the marine environment. I very much liked the remarks by David Ong on practice and on evaluating what is actually there, be that national practice and cooperative practice, and to exchange about what can be done. Not how to interpret the law. Do we need more law? Do we need different law? But what do we do? And via this cooperation, do we get together? And I think we can even take this from the state level. We have very much talked, not exclusively, but very much talked about states as actors, contracting states, of the Law of the Sea Convention, diplomatic relations. But I think if we talk about practice, we also need to involve citizens. And Wu Haidang in his talk about Vietnam and the implications for the population has talked about awareness, we might also call this ocean literacy. And I think if we include that level, what can be done? How do we teach people about the importance of the oceans and what do they do as a result? What do NGOs do? What do citizens do? Do we request that extra plastic cup? Or do we say, no, thank you. I'm not taking a plastic bag. I'm reusing my cups. I think it makes a difference. And maybe we much stronger, particularly in certain regions, need to address all levels, from the diplomatic, interstate level, the law, other instruments, of top-down instruments of governance, to the bottom-up approach of what people can do. And they can only do that if we teach them. So this is a strong quest for ocean literacy, for ocean awareness, but also, and here I'm going back to the presentation by Wu Haidang, it's also a matter of how do we include science. And maybe that's a perspective that, of course, also for the microplastic played a role. But I think if we address governance, particularly in a region like the South China Sea, we should place a strong emphasis on science, on scientific information, on acting and practice in accordance with scientific findings, and of transmitting these findings, of sharing these findings in an understandable manner with citizens and stakeholders, so that in the end we have a top-down and a bottom-up approach that hopefully meets somewhere in the middle to implement our sustainable development and sustainable growth strategy for the South China Sea and for other regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nela. Thank you so much for your precise, thoughtful, and comprehensive, comment. We really, got a lot, from what you have, really, commented. We really, the international community really put more effort on what we can do and what can be done instead of, continue talking and talking. So I think, we still have some time, for questions and answers. I don't know, whether anyone, on the, meeting room have any questions for the professors. I may need, the help from the two professors who are on the spot.
Ambassador Xu, maybe I can act as your assistant.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
To assist your role as the chair, so I can see there is one hand there. So please.
谢谢主持人，谢谢徐老师，谢谢徐老师、周老师，我是生态环境部华南环境科学研究所于云军。有2个问题，我先可以补充一下，就是这个在南海区域现在现存的多边的与海洋环境保护相关的一些机制。一个呢是生态环境部主导参与，作为这个中方的主导机构参与的，英文叫 COBSEA，中文的话一般叫东亚海协作体。这个有9个国家，南海周边，除中国以外还有其他的几个国家，加上韩国。另外一个叫 PEMC 的这个机制的参与国更多，但它不仅仅是包括海洋环境保护的，当然就是说，在 UNEP 的这个体制下面的这个 COPC 呢，这个议题也非常广泛。其中有一个议题我们现在正在讨论的，就是关于海洋保护区网络的，跟您讲的这个是比较相关。但是就说您这里讲的一个，我想问一下，就您说的这个南海海洋保护区，是我们南海的沿岸国在这个领海的海洋保护区呢，还是说在南海的争议海域建海洋保护区？这2个可能是不同的概念。另外一个就是说，这个如果说是海洋保护区网络的话，现在可能有国际上面有更多的实践，而且我们国家与东北亚的其他几个国家也成立了东北亚海洋保护区网络。关于周老师提到这个塑料的问题，目前呢，我所了解到的啊，联合国体系下面的 UNEP 是一个主导的一个机构，在讨论这个问题的。今年呢，我具体哪一年我不太记得了，已经召开了好几轮的专家咨询会 ad hoc， 讨论这个塑料。最开始可能讲的是海洋塑料垃圾的问题，现在可能慢慢演变成为了一个海洋，不叫把海洋2个字可能去掉了，就塑料公约的问题。这个可能在明年的2022年2月份，在内罗毕召开这个联合国环境大会的第2阶段会议，第1阶段是线上的，可能会再次对这个问题进行讨论。可能这个将来的话，对这个塑料公约会有一个说法，但是现在目前这个南海周边的国家都比较倾向于赞成制定一个塑料公约来管控塑料垃圾，也就是我们末端的这个海洋塑料垃圾，或者说微塑料的问题。谢谢。
Ambassador Xu, can I respond a few words and before Professor Zhou might say something?
Please go ahead.
是这样，我回到中文，非常感谢于云君刚才其实是一种补充了啊，因为他在这个环科所工作嘛，这个属于对这方面他们可能跟进的更密切一点。其实前面你说的像这个 COPC 啊，这个 NOWPEP 这些我都非常清楚啊。在07年前后呢，我还甚至给他们做regional consultant， 就是看我们这些项目下的这些国家，比方说西北太的、东亚海的这些国家呢，在这些就是 multilateral 这个 environmental treaties， 在这些领域多边的环境条约的这个签署，这个 national progress 怎么样一个情况？然后另外一个是marine litters， 有的管叫 debris。那么在这些项目里边，就看看我们整个的这个 这个周边这个项目下的这些国家的一些进展情况，看看他们的国家报告，然后呢写区域的这种报告。这个其实在鼎盛时期呢，真的还是做得不错的啊。现在当然可能你们也应该知道，就后续它的经费啊，它的这个参与度还是有一些影响。那么后来实际上从那个时候，大概10年前后，就是中国 take the lead， 作为这个项目的更大的一个推动者，包括提供资金。这个也是我讲的，我们在这个南海啊，包括我们周边的中国海这些周边合作进行这种环保的合作呀、海洋保护区合作或者渔业合作，这些都是一些基础。也有非常多的一些经验，甚至也有教训可以吸收，所以为我们这个现在提的这些就是海洋环境保护的合作机制，或者是今天我讲的这个海洋保护区的这种建立，我想这都是一些很好的一些积累吧，在这前期的一些积累。那么关于你提的像保护区的这个设立这个里边呢，这个就我也是实际上倡导这样的一个理念。那么这个具体的区域，可能我们要下一步有待是趋，但是绝对不是你讲的说是或者是国家之间，或者是争议海域，没有这样的一个区分。因为我们现在对这个科学层面，对南海的这些生物多样性的一些情况，相对来讲掌握的还是不错的。这个在这个里边，我们可以界定，就是我其中提到了，比方地中海，它对这个重要的海洋保护区的一个名录，它看我们在哪些地方需要优先保护，或者这个是科学要依据科学，我们要和科学家一起来看。这个哪些呢？就是有一个轻重缓急啊，怎么样去把它建起来？所以这个是我想的，最终是应该是一个 cover 整个的一个区域里边这个，因为我们国家都有自己的这种保护区，那么也不一定我们非要设在争议海域，我们还有很多的这些生物的多样性需要被纳入这个保护区的体系。是这个里边呢，就是我刚才一点点感慨，就是说我20年前提这个渔业委员会，到现在我今天又提这个海洋保护区，因为我看到我们很多。不仅仅是学者，就是 academia， 还有很多的 politician 也很感兴趣。那么在这个里边，我们有很多学术，像我们这个 panel 里的 Dr. Wu， 他也写了很多这方面的一些东西，我也都认真的去拜读。所以我觉得这个里边有很多具体的一些东西，可能后续呢，我们可以再进一步的去研究。就希望大家关注这样一个问题，然后能够呢采取各种的措施啊或者办法来推动这样一个事情。借这个场合呢，就是说我说售卖我自己的这样的一个观念或者一点小理念吧。
谢谢薛老师哈，也谢谢刚才那位那个 comments 非常好，就是提供了非常好的一些信息哈。对刚先说塑料吧，对塑料的一些管控有一些实质性的一些推进，这是我们非常愿意看到的。我刚还想补充一下薛老师对那个保护区的那个观点，其实我是同意的哈，就是对保护区，尤其是在南海的保护区设立，从那个就是学者层次，他更看重它的一种重要性。它具体它的那个，对我知道从 governance 角度来讲，它还有操作性的问题，是不是可以做，或者做的难易程度肯定是有的。但从我们角度来讲呢，就是有一些可能是不做已经不行了。虽然它有可能所在的海域它可能存在一定的争议，但是真是不做不行。而且从多方面角度来讲，相关的国家也是愿意来做。所以我自己感觉哈，就是从保护区这个角度的合作来讲，是相对来说，相对于其他渔业或者资源角度的一种合作来讲，是应该更加容易来着手的。我比如说仙娥礁，因为这几个那个南沙的几个岛礁，我是亲自脚踩上去的哈，我觉得是非常非常迫切需要来进行保护的一些东西。我们也从各个层次，包括对三沙市，包括像中央，我们都提过相关的一些建议哈。我们也希望在此这个场合再重申一下我们的一些迫切的一些想法。谢谢。
So thank you. Thank two professors who have already answered the question. I don't know, Nela, you have got, the question or the answer not. The guy, the guy who put forward the question is from the Ministry of Ecological Environment of the People's Republic of China. So it's a question about, how to establish, the maritime, protection, institution in order to make sure, pollutions, especially, macro plastic, pollutions will be properly, dealt with. So let us now move to the next question.
我是来自厦门大学南海研究院施玉斌我有一个问题，一个 comment， 问题是给徐教授的这是一个比较细的问题，也可以武博士能回答也行。就是您是建议在南海设立这个海洋保护区，但是我们知道这个南海的一些沿岸国，比如说像这个菲律宾、马来西亚包括越南，这些国家其实已经在自己的管辖范围内设立了自己的保护区了。但是问题是，这些国家的一个新的就近几年的事情说，他们在原来设定保护区的基础之上，又向 IMO 向国际海事组织申请设立特别敏感海域 PSSA， 但是它地方是一样的。那么这样的一个动作，是不是表明海洋保护区在这个环保方面的这个效果不佳呢？还是说有其他的原因？这个看薛老师或者是这个武博士能不能回答？还有 comment goes to Dr. Wu's presentation. Dr. Wu suggested that China's ocean governance should also include areas beyond national jurisdiction, for example, the Arctic. I want to say that China has already done so. We have already released our domestic legislation on deep sea mining, and also in 2018, China released its white paper on the Arctic, and also China also released the marine scientific research, fishing, and tourism activities in the Arctic and Antarctic. So I think, of course, there could be some other places that could be improved further. That's my comment to Dr. Wu. Thank you.
Ambassador Xu, should I go?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
我觉得这个是一个非常应该说呢是非常好的一个问题，但是稍微有一点点就是带一点敏感性吧。我觉得就是说我假设我们不去看它背后的一个动因这个就是说它这样的一种做法，在保护区之上再申请更加具有国际权威性或者认可度的这样的一些像敏感水域的这个层层加码吧，对它加以保护。我觉得一方面可能还是我刚才讲的那种现实的需要，就是对这个生物多样性的这种这个 loss 也希望能够给它尽可能好的一些保护。那么也有一些就是我们在这个区域里边，就是说倡导这样的一些合作，多边合作面临的一些挑战，因为我们大家可能更多的是关心自己的争议。自己争议的这种海域，或者尽可能多的这个扩大化自己的国家的这种利益等等的这样一些问题。那么这个也恰恰呢是我们这样一个倡导这样的一种在地区上进行这样多边合作，希望能把这样的一个局面给它打破的。所以在这个地方呢，我们就是说确实是很难，但是一点一点要把这种 energy 给它 channel 到那个更加的有利于整个区域的国家和区域的这个人民。能够享受这样一种公众的福祉，我想，所以这个呢，我想是我们一直以来一直在坚持做这样一些研究，这样一些呼吁吧。我想是这样一个情况。谢谢。
So, Professor Hayden, you have anything to respond?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So thank you for your comment, the gentleman from Xiamen University. Yes, I agree that China have a lot of plans, sectoral plans relating to the Arctic and relating to the seabed mining. But when you talk about ocean planning, comprehensive ocean planning, you should only consider them in one scope. It means whatever you do in the Arctic, how it would balance with what you do in the Antarctic, and how it would balance again with what you do in the South China Sea and East China Sea. I'm talking about a master plan where you consider own activities and interests in the ocean as a singular ocean, including areas under Chinese claims for sovereignty and sovereign rights, and beyond those areas. The reason why I came up with that is we are missing that in Vietnam. And I saw that in Malaysia. I also study the ocean governance policy in Malaysia. And when I come across their defense strategy, they have a comprehensive and integrated approach of looking at all the areas that affect Malaysia, including areas under Malaysia's sovereignty, areas under Malaysia sovereign rights, for example, exclusive economic zone and continental shelf, and also areas beyond those sovereign and sovereign rights claim, but can affect Malaysia's strategic interest. And they all mix them up and integrate them in one policy so that they can have a better look, a more overview look, and then they can create a balanced policy so that they see where they put the resource and where they put less research and where they put more resources. Is what I meant. But thank you for your comment.
Thank you a lot. So I guess we have a few minutes more for last one or two questions. Please go ahead. Go ahead, Nela.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't hear properly. Thank you. I would just like to briefly comment. How do I take my hand down again? Okay. Comment on my colleague Wu Haidang and the quest for an integrated master plan. I have very great sympathy for overcoming fragmentation, for overcoming sectoral approaches when it comes to the ocean, because it's an interconnected, one large ecosystem. The question for me from the perspective of governance, however, is where to start, because you can zone this up. You would say, well, for a certain local coast or region, you would need a master plan, integrated coastal zone management. You're correctly pointing out that on the national level, you would need an integrated master plan that covers shipping in the Arctic, deep sea resources. I would even say, well, we would need a master plan for the whole ocean, a global multilateral master plan. But I'm not sure whether we are close to this integrated master plan on a global level, because not even the SDGs are free of conflict. If we look at the SDGs, we see that promoting one SDG could have a negative effect on another SDG. So drafting a global master plan, I think, is important, but we're not yet there. And then the question is, well, what level? And here again, it's certainly in the national level is important, and but my quest here again would be for cooperation for regions and for trying to find an integrated master plan for a certain region and start there, maybe instead of asking one particular important player or state to also come up with its own integrated strategy. So again, here for this very reasonable quest of integration, I would make the quest for looking at regions, for looking at our ecosystems and cooperating in that context. And then maybe we can go one step further and at one point even have a global master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nela. I do have an online question from a name by Holly. The question goes like this one. I'd like to ask a stupid question, which I am curious about. From the perspective of the law of the sea and ocean governance, what are the characteristics of the South China Sea in terms of marine ecology, conservation of marine living resources or other aspects? By the way, many thanks to all excellent speakers. So the question is focused as what are the characteristics of the South China Sea in terms of marine ecology, conservation of marine living resources? So I would like to ask Professor Zhou Xinqing from Nanjing University and also Professor Wang Guanxiong from Taiwan Normal University to answer the question. Professor Zhou, you please.
But compared with the international expectation, we still have some way to go. The others, ecological. I'm not quite sure if I covered most of the questions. If somebody else can give some input to this question.
So let me now invite Professor Wang from Taiwan Normal University to add something.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I didn't hear the response from Professor Zhou. Just in case there is any overlapping with Professor Zhou's response, please tolerate. My answer to the actually it is quite a good question. The question is on the what are the characteristics of the South China Sea in terms of the conservation of marine living resources. It is quite good to figure out which part of that kind of the sort of the governance, maritime resources governance in the South China Sea. I would like to focus on a term that is the partnership, because under the concept of the governance, we don't have that kind of archaeological levels, different levels of the orders, or different levels of the resolutions to do something. We are doing certain kind of cooperation under the idea of the partnership. In other words, every party is on the same level, so that we could cooperate to solve some of the issues. For example, for the conservation of the maritime living resources, from the very beginning, I think we should do some kind of cooperation to figure out or to do the certain kind of research on what kind of living resources are endangered. I still remember in a couple, probably 4 years ago, when I attended the South China Sea Conference organized by the Vietnamese government. That was the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. I still remember the discussion between me and the other scholars. All of us, we are concerned about the living resources issues in the South China Sea. But the problem is we don't know what kind of fishery stocks are endangered. So I think the come back to the problem of the ocean governance, the characteristics of the ocean governance, specifically on the maritime fisheries resources in the South China Sea. I would like to say we have to raise the spirit of the partnership, or the concept of the partnership, so that we could work together on the same level, and also to solve the issues that we all concerned. So that is my response to the excellent question about the issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wang. You know, it's really true. The international community does have a shared future. So we all need to work together, either as economic development or environmental protection or maritime governance, or combating the pandemic, or combating drug trafficking, or nuclear, or mass destruction of weapons, proliferation. So all those, transnational or global challenges need the international community to come together, to work together, and to do something as soon as possible. So I guess, we are already, running out of time, and I would, like to declare, the seminar stops here, and I would, very much, thank the organizer once again, and to thank, all the speakers today again, thank you so much, and hope to welcome you to Beijing. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. It's a pleasure meeting
Very excellent,
you.
Derek. And thank you to Dr. Wu.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. 因为那个就是想问徐教授。
Thank you.
徐教授，问徐教授和邹教授，我还是把问题问完吧，可以吗？就是延长一点点一点点。就是主席啊，我是来自华南师范大学地理科学学院的刘云刚。那个今天对这个议题感兴趣的，因为它是涉及到那个海洋治理的实践，我对实践2个字特别感兴趣。因为稍微讲的稍微长一点，就是我们都知道这个南海海洋治理的复杂性，其实大家对于这种形式的东西呢都已经很清楚了。具体呢，它其实涉及的是一些实践的案例，我觉得是特别想听到的。但是2位刚才讲的时候呢，都是很快，没有讲得很详细。我其实就是想追问说，有没有在你们的这个研究当中啊，有没有一些发现一些特别好的案例？举个恰当的例子哈，比如说我们现在这个讨论结婚，已经不用说讨论说去民政局去领证，还是去教堂领证的这种形式上的问题，而是更多去讨论他们2个能不能恋爱走到一起啊。这样的一个过程呢，是穷人跟富人这个一起更稳定呢，还是2个门当户对的更稳定呢？因为我们南海地区的这个国家和国家之间，包括国家之上和之下的这种成分是非常复杂的，有一个什么样的这种规律，就是在里面能有一些成功合作的案例，能够给我们一些启示和指引，我觉得这是更重要的。刚刚薛教授提到了地中海的案例，其实我们也研究了，我们觉得其实大面上的东西呢，不太适合讲是可以的，真正运用下来，就跟我理解的就是很多复杂的细微的东西，我们需要知道的是，什么样的情况下，我们有什么样的成功的案例可以值得吸取。如果有这样的案例呢，麻烦这个请教一下，能够告诉1、2，就这个，谢谢。
这个已经是会外的了，我们主席已经结束我们这个会了。所以我简单回应一下吧。如果说实践呢，其实我们周边呢，尤其在南海，其实双边或者多边，比方说2、3方或者几方实践，其实各个方面都有。这个其实不仅限于这种生物保护啊、生物多样性保护，或者是海洋环境合作，其他各个领域都有。但是如果具体下来，就是说你要去看，那我就觉得得是 case by case， 肯定我3、2句话讲不清楚。所以这个里边我们也是大量的进行了各种各样的案例的一些研究，然后也感觉到呢，就是我们没有办法完全拿哪个区域的一个成功案例来对我们这个。但是我刚才也讲了，你可以一点这个一点那个去看哪个东西适合我们，结合我们自己的这个特色，然后我们自己的特点或者我们的困难，我们就可以一点一点的去借鉴，无论从实体方面、从程序方面，还从它后续的这个可持续的支撑这样的一系列的保障等等的这些东西，这个还是有的。这个但是可能3言2语的就解释不了。周教授，您那边。
抱歉，其实我没有太多的这方面的经验，因为本身不是做这个的哈。但是我觉得那个什么总体的感觉，读过一些文献，双边的比多边的容易哈。可能有一些成功的一些案例，可能更多的是在双边这方面的一些成功的案例。那么那个双边，至于您刚讲了一个就是穷人家孩子、富人家孩子这个例子啊，其实我都有一个想法，确实是，可能大国跟小国之间的一些在 涉及到这方面的一些争端的解决，可能会更容易一些，因为它可以有多方面的一些补充性的一些条款或者是什么，它可以来做一些调配，做一些平衡。比如说，我记得是好像是哪个是澳大利亚跟印尼还是什么？我印象不太深了哈，有一个就相当于共同开发的区这么一个案例，当时是作为非常成功的一个就是UNCLOS 的一个案例来做，因为从资源角度来讲，你看南海这个里头资源大家都在争，但是他们就解决的比较好，作为一个共同开发区，只不过大家在比例上面有一个 negotiation， 那么如果不是特别舒服，我可以在别的方面给你一些补充，这样子大家就可以平安无事的，大家可以来做这个事情哈。我在南海这块，我自己感觉哈，可能在北部湾、中越、渔业相对来说可能做的比较好一点。我不知道说的是不是对啊？所以我觉得就是双边那个比多边好一点。完了以后那个穷富差距稍微大一点，可能会更好办一点。自己感觉哈，这瞎说啊，没有任何学术性。谢谢。
行吧，我想我们就到这边，否则的话，我们这个主席那个局部大使会觉得很莫名其妙，怎么还在这开会？那我就感谢我们刚才这个问题，感谢我们周教授，我就带他结束，谢谢大家，谢谢。
谢谢薛老师，谢谢周老师，谢谢两位，谢谢。也再次感谢今天参与本议题的所有的参会代表们，谢谢大家的支持。议题3呢就到此结束了。我们今天晚上还有欢迎晚宴仪式，那受邀请的代表请在6点半准时到达大宴会厅，也就是今天开幕式的场地，包括现在的这个场地。谢谢。